Hey guys, it's Richard, the Aficionado channel and Reefs.com. How you guys doing today? I'm here with my friend Henry, who is a firefighter for City of Miami.
Miami-Dade County.
Miami-Dade County. Thank you for coming here.
You're very welcome.
And we're here today to talk about fire safety in our aquarium.
It doesn't take a firefighter to, incorporate safety in your aquarium. Anybody can incorporate this, huh?
Yeah.
We would just happen to be talking about it because we mentioned a mishap that one of our friends recently had. It ended up being a catastrophic failure where we still don't know what caused that. So yeah, I would say it's pretty important. That would be devastating to have something like that happen in your home.
Sure.
I've been in many a home where you see everything is destroyed. And sure, it's your fish tank, but it's your album, it's your memories, your home is...
Right, it's something priceless.
Yeah.
You can't really... A lot of stuff that we have at our home, it's irreplaceable, that we collected over the years.
And I guess we take for granted that just, stuff's just gonna work forever. And that nothing's gonna happen, Well, Richard and I came up with a few points that we can hit on that might help to make your aquarium less hazardous or safer per se. Not necessarily meaning that your entire house is going to burn to the ground, but these might be things that could lead to, say, equipment failure, injury to your animals, some damage, perhaps some flooding, or even injury to yourself. Electrocution is very real. We read through forum posts, many times about people who've been electrocuted from some type of equipment failure or some type of failure in their aquariums.
All right, so let's get the easy stuff out of the way. Drip loop, let's talk about that.
I would say drip loop is any time that you mix any kind of water, but more importantly seawater with electricity, you're gonna have a bad outcome. So I'm sure your viewers know what a drip loop is. Just basically a way to keep the water, if it were to leak out the back of your aquarium, if you'd have a small leak, the cord wouldn't serve as some type of a chute taking the water right to the electrical outlet. Would you say that's kind of like a good way of explaining what a drip loop is?
I guess so. I mean, I guess the very basically to explain it is having, this is the outlet, this is your equipment, and then you have a loop like this so that water doesn't go straight into the outlet. It just goes to the bottom and it'll just drip to the bottom, so that water won't go into the outlet itself and causing any kind of like a meltdown or a fire per se.
I mean, say best case scenario, you might trip that breaker, but if it happens when you're away, your whole aquarium is going to be down. You're not going to have any power. Perhaps your apex might alarm you, or your aquarium controller, and not singling any controller out, might alarm you as to some type of failure.
Before you mentioned about the breakers. Tell me about the breakers that you're talking about.
Well, anytime that you have water and electricity, not just for aquariums, this is going to go, I'm sure anybody that has kitchen outlets or bathroom outlets, you're going to know that it's a GFCI breaker. It's a special breaker that it trips whenever there's some type of a short. Yeah, again, I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't explain the inner workings of how the outlet works, but it's basically there as a safety in case, say you have a blow dryer and that blow dryer ends up in the bathtub or in the sink, any type of blender or whatnot that you're using in the kitchen, if that ends up in the water, that special outlet will trip, saving your life ultimately.
Right.
So that's kind of the importance. I know a lot of us install aquariums, and we never take the time to to change those outlets out. Many of us maybe don't have the ability to change it. Maybe have an electrician come out and and change that outlet out.
Right.
Not everybody can so quickly go to Home Depot and has the know-how to buy an outlet, remove an outlet, shut off the breaker to make that outlet safe, the main breaker in the house, install your outlet. And I think that they even make GFCI outlets that go in your electrical panel. I don't know for sure, but I think I read about that one time.
Me too. I think I read about it as well. And the BRS recently covered on black boxes and etc. But let's cover the whole thing, like whole equipments in general. Like for example, like a lot of knockoff products and such. Why should we avoid some of the stuff, and what should we look for?
I guess that's a touchy subject because it's not like we have unlimited resources to buy, equipment. I can see why somebody would want to, save a couple of dollars, and try to get some equipment. Some of the lights that we use, some of the pumps that we use, can be pretty expensive. But I think that there's always some I guess some give and take maybe, because these companies come up with these products that when they're made in the States, or when they're made within the States, or perhaps in Germany or in Europe, they got to follow certain guidelines. When you're buying like knockoffs, I don't think that those manufacturers or those fabricators are held to the same
standards.
Yeah, the same standards that at least here in the States, you have UL listed. Those standards are there for a reason. They're there to make sure that there's no corners cut. They're there to make sure that that these guys use the proper gauge cables. That they put in redundancies. That they're made to last and to not burn up or not, yeah, to not cause failures. Which could cause you damage or harm.
Right. In my case, doing what I do, I tend to see a lot of products, and a lot of those knockoff products that I have seen come with a smaller gauge cables. And why is that important in any kind of equipment that we use?
Well, when you try to pass current through a cable, the electrical code has standards. Depending on how much current and how long the cable is. You have to have a certain type or a certain gauge wire. If you undercut that gauge wire, it's there for a reason. It's because you're gonna overheat the cable. Again, maybe the cable is not gonna burst into flames, but that overheated cable could heat up. It could heat up and then maybe cause something else to fail. It could heat up and maybe the solder connection become loose. Maybe that loose connection then maybe short something else out. I guess it could snowball, into some, something simple can snowball into something far worse. I think that a lot of these tips all boil down to not being lazy or our own inherent laziness sometimes.
So that's our fourth tip.
As humans,
don't be lazy.
Which probably should be the first tip, because I think it all kind of stems from laziness. And I don't mean laziness like you're just gonna be sitting on your couch. It's much more fun to feed your fish. To maybe clean your and even chores that you do, clean your glass. You clean your glass and it's like instant gratification. Your tank looks great. You tweak your lights, but a lot of people, when you close the stand, it's kind of like our kids. The room is messy. You close the room and the mess just kind of magically goes away. A lot of the people that, it's just easy to close your stand and the tank looks great. I think that if we take some time to maintain our equipment, or when we talked earlier about installing, if you take that little extra time installing, I think that your tank's gonna do better, it's gonna perform better, you're gonna be prouder of it. Because when somebody comes, how many times you go to somebody's house and see their tank? Hey, can I see your sump? Well, but the tank looks great, right?
I've been guilty of that. Yes.
It's awesome when you can show somebody your tank and you want to show your sump out. It looks great. And it doesn't have to be the greatest equipment, but just that you take some pride in your installation.
Yeah.
We used to be involved as youth in car audio, and we used to take pride in our wiring, in the installation. It was important. So I think that if we took some pride in our aquarium installation, I think you would have more success.
Yeah. And
I think that our tanks would be safer, yeah, and I think the equipment would last longer.
I definitely agree that equipment will definitely last longer, especially if you take care of all the salt creeps and stuff like that, because salt water and your electrical equipment today
builds up over time.
Exactly.
I've seen many sumps where you open a door and it's like an inch of salt creep in there, huh?
Yeah.
And that's something that only takes you a couple of minutes to just kind of wipe through there and clean that salt creep. If that salt builds up, that's the salt that you see. Imagine the salt you don't see.
Yeah.
Imagine that salt that builds up, around your outlet entries, around your plug connections.
Yeah. Definitely.
One of the things that I dislike about my stand but it's kind of like a double-headed sword. You know, it's good and bad. My Elo sump is divided in half, and I really dislike it because I like to have a large sump, you know, like most people do. But at the same time, that divider kind of protects the equipment from salt. Yeah. Salt water, you know, anytime you have your skimmer create salt spray, you know, just the splashing through your sock, the water, the sump, the water, you know, coming through your sock. I think all that just creates, you know, like salt moisture.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess all that builds up over time. Yeah. So whenever you have like a separate compartment, it always, I guess, is going to keep your equipment safer.
That's why I built this equipment wall on the side of my tank so that, you know, to keep every possible like way for that water to get into the equipment. So whatever we can do to separate it is the best, and whatever we can do to be on top of it, it's the most ideal situation. Another thing to look out for is dust, you know, because dust builds up in time. Something that you should definitely take a look. And decluttering a lot of your stuff. Decluttering
is big for me, yes.
It's a big thing. A lot of people don't take this into consideration, but you know, a lot of people they put the drivers of the lights or drivers of the pumps together and
kind of stack your drivers, yeah.
And you know, and that's actually very bad for the drivers because you know it emits a lot of heat and it kills the life cycle.
Right, even the longevity of the driver, right? Not necessarily mean that your driver is gonna explode.
Right.
But yeah, the longevity of the driver. Those drivers, I think, are made to give off some kind of heat. You know, I'm sure there's some type of a heat sink in there, even though you don't see it. Some of them actually are. Oh yeah. You know, some of the larger drivers, I guess, do have some metal heat sinks.
But. Yeah, I mean, if you've seen a lot of the like good quality drivers, like mean wheel drivers, you see the whole casing is made out of aluminum.
Yeah.
The whole body is heat sink. So I mean, it gives away a lot of heat, and then you're putting it, stacking it one by one. It can be fire hazard.
Yeah, boiling back down to taking that time.
Exactly.
You know, and it actually gets very difficult. The smaller your stand is, you know, I understand sometimes it's hard to find a place to put all your equipment. So you know, my friend Chris Canada's building that that Reef Savvy, and I think that we've probably got, I don't know, man, maybe 30 or 40 hours of just us sitting and, you know, and just slowly installing things. Sometimes you install some items and it just doesn't work out that way. We kind of, you know, got to gut it all and start over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the fun of the hobby. Not everybody, I guess, sees that part as fun. You know, maybe some people are a little OCD than others. But, you know, sometimes just kind of like planning things out, and instead of rushing to install your equipment, you know, if you want to install your equipment and, you know, kind of just put something on the ground and see how it works, when you're done, you know, disconnect it all and then properly install it. You know, take the time to try to plan your wiring. Try to maybe even draw it on a piece of paper. You know, all our minds work a little differently. Maybe draw it on a piece of paper. Maybe, you know, get on the computer and you know, create some type of
a CAD file or something.
Yeah, that's kind of a little advanced there, huh? I mean, even as far as I remember with Marvin when we were trying to set up his, I think we even cut out some square pieces of cardboard, and actually taped them up, you know, where the drivers were going to go, to try to, you know, kind of come up with a nice way of because looks is important.
Oh, very important.
Functionality is important.
For sure.
Safety is important.
And accessibility, you know, it all kind of,
accessibility. You know, if coming down to maintenance, which is not related to this, but if your maintenance is easy, you're going to do it. If the maintenance is difficult, you know, you're going to skip out.
Yeah. And another thing that people should consider, if you have a controller like Apex or something like that, they recently came out with a very useful kit called leak detection. And Henry, why do you think that is very important?
I actually just bought one in Black Friday, and I didn't have one installed before. I know several stories of, I guess, some type of failure that caused like a puddle. And man, I just read somebody's build thread the other day that had a failure, and he walked into a dark room. I think it was at nighttime. He walked into a dark room, into a puddle, and I think he ended up in the hospital or the urgent care center because he was electrocuted. You know, like you mentioned earlier, salt water and electricity do not mix. So, you know, if you were to have some type of early detection, you know, that's maybe something that would alert you, and maybe you'd walk in that room, you know, and not to say that he was careless, but you know, maybe you take the time to you know, turn the light on. If you see some water on the ground, you know, maybe turn that breaker off momentarily, you know, just to find out, you know, what's going on. You know, if you had a driver on the floor, you had a power strip on the floor, you potentially have a power source, you know, energizing the floor. So yeah, it could cause you some harm. I think in the forums recently, I read that the leak detection was like a wife make happy device. I'm not sure the term they use, but you know, it's a device to keep your spouse happy.
Right. And you know, I think it's a very good tool that they came up with, because you know, like it's in the end, you know, like we want that peace of mind, and I think this is the one great kit that will just do that.
Yeah, early detection, I guess, is always the best.
For sure.
You know, if you can catch something where it's just a small bit of moisture on the floor, you know, before you have a large failure. Right. You know, I've seen plumbing failures where, you know, it starts as a small leak, or even tank failures. You know, I've seen a couple of tank failures where it starts as a small leak and just progressively gets worse and worse.
Right. I mean, and also I work a lot. I work from like 9 to 9 almost every day. And like, let's say like a small leak were to happen to my tank, God forbid it. But I mean, if something like that were to happen, my leak detection will catch it. I will call somebody and then have that fixed while I'm at work. Or, you know, like just to arrange something so that, you know, like we could prepare for something in time, so we could save everything, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So this has nothing to do with actual aquarium itself, but Henry, being the firefighter that he is, that's something that he has noticed a lot, is actually keeping your smoke detectors full of battery and operational.
Yeah, actually a lot of people tend to disregard, you know, whenever that device starts to make some noise, it's kind of just annoying. And I mean, I've run on many calls where it could just be a medical call, but you notice that the detectors are up. You know, if you ask them why, you know, they'll tell you, yeah, it was making noise and it was bothering us. If you look at the statistics, a number of fires, the majority of fires in homes that involve fatalities or that cause fatalities, you're going to see that they happen in homes that either were not installed with smoke detectors or they were non-functioning. You know, detection is very important. You know, if something happens in your aquarium, and not necessarily your aquarium, but you know, since we're talking about aquariums, you know, if something happens in your aquarium, there's a major equipment failure, which it doesn't happen very often. But if there was, and you were sleeping at night, you know, the smoke detector would alert you fairly quickly. You know, I've been on a number of calls where, you know, we'll get called into a failed fan, or I've had a couple of calls where, you know, we've gone into a equipment failure on aquariums. You know, it doesn't happen a lot, but I'd say in 15 years I probably had maybe 2 or 3. And they were all in homes where they had detectors. Sometimes your detectors are tied into your house alarm, and you don't even have to be there, you know, for us to be alerted. So, you know, I think a lot of people kind of, you know, oversee that maybe, and that's pretty important. You know, again, not really aquarium related, but I always try to, you know, include that as a tip, you know, if we can.
Of course. All right, guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you incorporate some of the stuff that Henry has talked about, and make
Richard
or me, and make your aquarium much more safer, and make your aquarium equipments last a little longer. And hopefully this has helped you. All right. Well, thank you for watching again. Have a great day. You ready?
I guess so. You can always just Photoshop me in here and just keep talking.
All right, and I'm gonna do the Japanese Japanese kung fu dubbing.
What you do is you start off with yourself and then you pretend that I walked in.
There you go.
That's perfect. You know, you should get a video of me walking in here in case you want to add some stuff. You know, I'll just come in and I go, hey folks.
You know, this is
nice to see you.
This is all gonna be on the bloopers.